Blue Mage, throughout the history of Final Fantasy, has consistently been one of, if not the strongest job and/or archetype whenever it appears, and this is a pattern that remains true in our favorite MMO, Final Fantasy XIV. But with that strength also comes complexity and confusion, and so here's everything you need to know to learn and play the Azure Caster. Of all the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, Blue Mage is by far the most unique, as unlike its peers that gain new abilities as they level, Blue Mage only has access to a singular spell in Water Cannon throughout their entire leveling process, not including roll actions. But despite this, Blue Mage easily has access to the most spells of any job. However, the catch is, they have to head out into the world and actually find them. You see, Blue Mage has traditionally been a job that learns its spells through interacting with enemies, and this remains true in Final Fantasy XIV. So while they may only learn one spell naturally, there are over 100 others that they can learn from enemies, though only 24 can be used at a time. But that raises a question. How do you actually learn the spells? Well, to learn a new spell, 3 conditions have to be met. First, you have to find an enemy that has the spell that you want to learn. Second, you have to wait for the enemy to actually complete the attack you want to learn. And third, you have to kill the enemy while also staying alive yourself. If all 3 conditions are met, you then have a chance to learn the spell. And these are the only 3 conditions that have to be met, as you technically don't have to be a specific level to learn any spell. Though when it comes to getting spells in dungeons and raids, you do of course still have to meet the base level to actually enter those instances. Speaking of which, let's now talk about another aspect that makes Blue Mage unique, its classification as a limited job. You see, Blue Mage, unlike any other job, is actually unable to use the duty finder in the traditional way, as they can't use it to queue into content randomly with other people. Because if they were able to do that, they would completely trivialize essentially any piece of content, either through their insane damage or their literal instant death abilities. And so Blue Mages are only able to do instance content either solo, which is something they very much can do, or they need to be in a pre-made party. As for how they enter instance content, they have to actually enable a certain setting found in the duty finder by hitting the gear icon found in the top corner. Another menu will open, allowing you to enable unsynced content, which allows you to enter any instance without queuing with random people, while also preventing you from being synced, unless you have level sync enabled, which if done actually does have an effect for Blue Mages, because if a Blue Mage does a piece of content level sync, then any spell found within will have a guaranteed chance to be learned, assuming the conditions that we talked about earlier are met. And while we're on the topic of levels, another aspect of Blue Mage being a limited job is its max level, as again, unlike the other jobs, Blue Mage's max level is usually 10 below the current maximum, and since they lack the ability to use one of the best sources of experience in the duty finder, they also have another way of gaining levels, as again, unlike the other jobs, they receive a massive amount of experience for killing normal enemies found in the overworld, making it one of the best ways to level the job. With the basics of how Blue Mage works covered, let's talk about how to get started with the job. Now, the first thing that you'll have to do is start the Out of the Blue quest found in the lower decks of Limsa Lominsa after you complete the base story of A Realm Reborn. But while this is when the job first becomes available, it isn't actually recommended starting your Blue Mage journey until you reach Shadowbringers, at least if you plan on leveling without the help of others. And the reason for this is that there are 2 enemies found in Shadowbringers that can be used to speed up the leveling process significantly, turning what would normally be multiple days of grinding into only a couple of hours. Because what you can do is aggro these leeches and pull them into the Cleanoids that will then eat them, causing the leech to die, rewarding you a hefty amount of experience, to the point that getting from level 1 to 50 would only take you a couple of minutes. That being said, this is of course very dangerous, as literally anything will kill you, and getting the Cleanoid to eat the leeches can be difficult without also aggroing them and potentially getting hit, which again will kill you. However, the process becomes significantly safer once you reach level 10, as you'll gain access to the roll action Sleep, since Blue Mage is of course a caster. And with Sleep, you'll now be able to disable the leeches to get aggro and then pull the Cleanoids to them, making it significantly more likely that they'll actually eat the leeches before anything can attack you and again kill you. Now, if you want to start leveling your Blue Mage before reaching Shadowbringers, or you're just on the free trial, then unfortunately the leveling process, as mentioned before, will take much longer if you choose to do so alone. But if you do have friends, you can just have people boost you by going to the highest level area you have available in the story and then have your friends kill mobs that you tag while not being in the same party. Either way, getting to max level is only the first half of getting your blue mage battle ready, because as we established earlier, you're likely not going to have any spells. And so now that you're max level, the next step is to start collecting. That is, after you upgrade your gear. And as a side note, unlike other jobs, blue mage's weapon is mostly glamour, so don't worry about only having a level 1 weapon. The only real advantage that you'll get from the later canes is the fact that you can equip higher levels of materia, which is a relatively small increase overall. But moving back to collecting spells, this is possibly the most overwhelming part of picking up blue mage, as again, there are over 100 different spells spread across the world of Final Fantasy XIV that you have to find and collect, most of which aren't even that useful or are just very hard to get. Now, I already have several videos on the channel going over where you can find every spell for each expansion, but if you're just looking to get your blue mage to a decent power level so you can start using it for random events, here are some of the more powerful but easy spells to get. Also, I'll have a link to my blue mage playlist in the pinned comment, along with it also being in the description. But that being said, let's quickly talk about why some of these spells are so powerful, starting with Triple Trident in Tingle. Triple Trident is a 150 melee attack that hits 3 times for a total potency of 450 on a 90-second cooldown. And Tingle is a weak 100 potency AoE that buffs your next melee attack by 100 potency. Now, by themselves, neither of them look particularly impressive, but the thing about Blue Mage is they excel when using spells in combination, as that 450 potency of Triple Trident becomes 750 if used in combination with Triple Trident. And this can be further increased by using another one of our spells, Whistle, which buffs your next melee attack by 80%, turning that 750 potency Triple Trident into a 1350 potency Triple Trident. And it's at this point you can begin to see how Blue Mage tends to get out of hand with its damage. Another example of this is Final Sting, which is basically Blue Mage's equivalent to a limit break, as they can't actually use LB normally, at least for the time being. What Final Sting does is inflict a massive 2000 potency to a single target at the cost of the caster's life, and after being used, you'll be inflicted with a debuff that prevents you from using it again for another 10 minutes. But as we mentioned before, Blue Mage is all about combining abilities, so since it's a physical attack, it can be buffed with Whistle, turning that massive 2000 potency into 3600 potency. But the power of Blue Mage isn't always about the damage they're able to do, as another powerful combo found in our spell list is Ram's Voice and Ultra Vibration. Ram's Voice is a spell that freezes all targets hit, and Ultra Vibration is an attack that instantly kills any frozen targets, allowing a Blue Mage to clear vast amounts of mobs and occasionally bosses in seconds. Moving on to our next spell, let's quickly talk about Breath of Magic, which is going to be one of the most powerful spells you'll be able to get without having to do any trials and or raids. Now, the effect of Breath of Magic is very simple, as it's just a very potent dot dealing 120 potency per tick over 60 seconds. Which comes out to about 2400 total potency if it's not buffed. But while Breath of Magic is incredibly powerful, the catch with this ability is that it doesn't actually stack. Meaning if you have multiple Blue Mages using Breath of Magic, you'll actually overwrite each other rather than applying separate dots, so only one can be used at a time. And the last few spells I want to talk about in our list are the pseudo-passive skills, Mighty Guard, Basic Instinct, and Etheric Mimicry. Starting with Mighty Guard, this is Blue Mage's equivalent to a tank stance, greatly reducing the damage they take and deal, while also increasing the enmity they generate. However, if used with Basic Instinct, the damage buff is removed, but the catch is that Basic Instinct can only be used in instances if you're by yourself, as it's a spell intended for helping you do solo content, which is why it also increases your damage by 100% and even provides a nice speed boost. And lastly, we have Etheric Mimicry, which is likely the most important of the Blue Mage spells, as this is how Blue Mage is able to choose their role. You see, while Blue Mage is a DPS by default, they're able to change this somewhat by using Etheric Mimicry, as this spell allows you to target someone of any role to gain a buff that mimics their role. And depending on the role buff you get, you'll not only receive stat increases like buffed healing, durability, or even crit rate, but also many of your spells will actually change if you have certain mimicries, with mitigations becoming more powerful if you have tanky mimicry, healing spells becoming more powerful if you have healing mimicry, and even some DPS skills become more powerful if you have DPS mimicry. And the last thing left to talk about when it comes to Blue Mage is the Masked Carnival, a piece of content exclusive to Blue Mage where you're able to take on various fights that often require you to utilize different spells to complete, like using Sticky Tongue to pull slimes that you can use to kill other enemies, or using Loom to break line of sight when you're inflicted with a very potent heavy. And the thing about the Masked Carnival is, similar to how you have to collect specific spells to continue the Blue Mage questline, you also have to complete specific stages to progress as well, usually in the form of the pinnacle stages, which tend to have special challenges and achievements that tend to reward things like titles or even special weapons. But possibly the most important thing about the Masked Carnival is the fact that it's required to obtain Moonflute, one of, if not the strongest Blue Mage spell, as it's learned from a totem that you obtain after completing 10 stages of the Masked Carnival. But you may be wondering, why is Moonflute so powerful? Well, it's actually really simple. All it does is provide a 50% damage buff for 15 seconds, with the downside that you can't do anything for 15 seconds after the effect ends. And while that might sound like a major downside, the truth is Blue Mage excels at doing large amounts of damage in a short period of time. But afterwards, their damage usually falls pretty significantly, as outside their burst, they really only use their filler spell. So increasing everything in that incredibly powerful burst by 50% is an insane boon that more than makes up for the forced downtime. The thing is, you can actually make Moonflute even better by lessening the downtime with specific spells, as it only prevents you from using new actions, meaning if you use a channeled ability before Moonflute ends, then that ability will actually continue, allowing you to keep doing damage even with the Moonflute debuff. Now, thankfully, completing the 10 stages you need to get Moonflute is actually incredibly simple, as you can easily do the first 10 without much trouble or even that many spells. In fact, I have another video going over just that, and I also have videos going over each of the pinnacle stages, and even a stream of me doing most of the Masked Carnival, so if you want more specific details, consider checking any of them out. But with that being said, let's quickly talk about the first 10 stages and the Carnival itself, starting with unlocking it and using the UI. So unlocking the Carnival is as simple as doing the Blue Mage quests. In fact, the quest after unlocking the Carnival is the one that requires you to beat your first pinnacle stage, stage 25. Once you unlock the Masked Carnival, you'll be able to access it by talking to this NPC in Ul'dah, and upon talking to the NPC, a menu will open showing you all of the different stages you're able to do, along with different information for each stage and the acts within it. However, the most important part of this menu is the section that tells you about the enemy's weaknesses and resistances, because not only will this give you an idea of what spells you should bring, but it'll also let you know if you can break stages with things like instant death spells or, more notably, Ultra Vibration. Because unlike other instant death attacks, Ultra Vibration will almost always kill the target if it can be frozen, meaning if a stage shows that an enemy is immune to instant death effects but is susceptible to freeze/stone, then they can be killed with Vibration. But with that being said, let's move back to the actual stages. As mentioned before, you need very little spell investment to actually beat these early stages. And of the few spells I recommend bringing, only one is found in the dungeon, making them all rather easy to obtain. Now, stages 1, 2, 4, and 5 can all be cheesed by using Ram's Voice and Ultra Vibration to instantly kill the final act. That being said, stages 2 and 4 do have first acts, so you'll have to DPS down said act with Breath of Magic and Ram's Voice first. Stages 6, 7, and 8 are all puzzle stages, with stage 6 requiring you to intentionally get blinded so you become immune to gaze attacks. Stage 7 requires you to use Sticky Tongue to pull the slimes that you can then use to kill the other enemies, and stage 8 has you attack the bombs to cause chain reactions. Also, in the final act of stage 8, you can use Ultra Vibration to kill the big bomb, but only if you're the one that actually freezes it. The last 3 stages of 3, 9, and 10 are all traditional fights where you just want to avoid attacks and interrupt what you can, while also whittling down the boss with Water Cannon / Ram's Voice and Breath of Magic. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to the Masked Carnival is Final Sting and Self-Destruct, the AoE equivalent that requires Toad Oil. Now, while both these spells cause you to die when cast, they can actually be used in the Carnival, because as long as the attack finishes the stage, it'll count as you getting the win. And Final Sting specifically, when fully buffed, will often kill most stages from half health. But keep in mind that enemies like slimes or puddings tend to be immune to physical attacks, so Self-Destruct would have to be used in those cases. And that's basically everything we need to cover when it comes to just starting Blue Mage, as this video is mostly intended to be an introduction to the job. Now, if you found this video helpful, please consider liking the video and possibly subscribing to the channel. Also consider checking out my Blue Mage playlist for more useful guides like this one showing how to do the Shadowbringers dungeons solo. But with that being said, thanks for watching, and I wish you the best on your Blue Mage journey.